Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and I'm joined with Mike today, or at Mike Me Up on Twitter, and we're going to be talking about the Seattle Seahawks and breaking them down for redraft. I'm sure we can sprinkle in a little bit of dynasty in today's video, but we're going to be talking about the main players on the team. Obviously, no kickers, no defenses today, just the quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and the tight ends for the Seattle Seahawks that we feel as though, or basically that I feel as though, are fantasy relevant for 2020. Before we get into it real quick, I'd like to ask that if you guys do end up enjoying, to hit that subscribe button down below. It's free. I put out videos every single day, and make sure you hit that like button as well to boost this video up the algorithm so that more beautiful people like yourself can see it. So without further ado, let's get into this. So Mike, where do you want them to look to follow you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Mike Me Up with two P's. And then, I work with BDG, Nick, and the, fellows Noah and Max, Animal, and Snacks. So you can find us on the BDG store. And then I have a solo Patreon that technically falls under BDG too, but it's called the Wolf Pack, and it's for dynasty players. So if you're a hardcore dynasty player, you want to just, fucking crush your league mates like we all do, hop on over. It's patreon.com/ourpack. There's a bunch of tiers in there. You can see what you like to do, whether, if you like Devy, there's Devy rankings. You have all my ranks in there. And then there's NFL and college side and rookie rankings as well. So, just a little flavor for everyone. I understand it's probably not for everyone. Not everyone's a DGen like me, in like 25 dynasty leagues and, doing whatever it is I'm doing. But if that's your thing, come on over and check us out. It's a pretty poppin' Discord. We're talking dynasty football like pretty much 24/7. I'm in there all day. So.
Yeah, make sure you guys check that out. All of Mike's stuff will be linked down below in case you just didn't follow exactly what he said. So let's get into it here. So the first player we're going to be talking about, obviously, is going to be the quarterback of the Seattle Seahawks, Russell Wilson, underdog ADP 72.9, quarterback number 6. First, I want to get your thoughts on him, and then I'll talk about my opinions as well. What do you think about Russell Wilson for redraft this year? Do you think quarterback 6 is a good price to be paying for him, or do you think that's a little too high, or maybe even you think that's too low and he should be higher?
I think that's a fair price to pay. I mean, I've been drafting Russell Wilson a ton in underdogs, just because I think the Seattle stack has been one of the most affordable and valuable to acquire, because you can get Russell Wilson usually in like the late 6th is usually when I pull the trigger on him. But you can get like DK in the 2nd, 3rd. You can get Lockett in the 4th, and then that's a very concentrated red zone and target volume. So that's usually what I'm looking for in a stack, at least. And Russ, look, people like to hate on Russ is he disappeared in the last part of the last season, but disappeared for him is still 19 points, right? He's not really going to lose you the week. And I think, this guy is, probably a Hall of Fame talent. I don't know if he'll get there because his stats are held back by Pete Carroll and his gum chewing ass. But overall, I mean, I think redraft wise, I love Russell Wilson. There's only, you obviously take Patrick Mahomes over him, right? You probably take Kyler over him.
Yeah.
You probably take most people would take Josh Allen over him. I think it's actually pretty close. And then I would take Lamar Jackson over him. And then, kind of past that, it's a toss up, right? And Russ has been doing it longer than all those people, and he's still in his prime. So, and as much as Pete wants to run the ball, you need a good defense to do that. So I think Russell Wilson's pretty good, fairly priced, if not slightly underpriced. I definitely don't think he's overpriced like most people think.
Okay. Yeah, I am in the other standpoint, the other boat of thinking he's slightly overpriced, but I do understand your argument. I think that quarterback 6 is a perfectly fine place to take him. I would lean. What do you think about Justin Herbert versus Russell Wilson? Who would you lean
in redraft? I want Russ. Yeah, okay. I want Russ. I mean, if you want Herbert, no problem. I've been mixing in both Herbert and Russ, because in the underdogs, they basically go back to back, and they have been for quite some time. But the reason why I go Russ and underdogs, because like I said, it's easier to get the stack for him, and it's a lot harder to get the stack for Russ, because you have to get Keenan Allen, and then you have to kind of reach for Mike Williams. I don't really like where his ADP is at right now. And then with Russ, you can get Gerald Everett later, and I like him better than Jared Cook. So it's a toss-up, but I think for redraft purposes, I'm going to go with the guy that's kind of been balling out, but I understand the arguments for Herbert as well. I think they're both correctly valued, and you can kind of go either way. Personally, I would mix in a little bit of both.
Okay, so right now, Russ, last season, he finished as quarterback 6 and 4-point, quarterback 4 and 6-point per passing touchdown league, so he is probably pretty fairly priced, obviously, quarterback 6 on underdog. Does anyone even play in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues at this point? Do you play in any of those?
6-point passing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's all I play in. I barely play in any 4-point passing. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me that a running TD was worth more than a passing TD.
Okay, so we're on the complete opposite standpoints on that. Yeah. All of mine are 4-point. So
yeah, I mean, it's fine. I mean, if you're doing 4 points, I think the edge might even go to Russ a little bit because he rushes a bit more than Herbie. Even though Herbie can do it, I think Russ has been doing it for quite some time. So it's pretty close, man. They're great quarterbacks. Like I think those two are the quarterbacks I target the most in underdogs because they're both going in that late 6th, early 7th round. I don't think there's that big of a difference between one of them and like a Dak or a Josh Allen.
Yeah, I can definitely agree on that. So the next position to talk about here is the running backs. Obviously, we'll lead off with Chris Carson, but the running backs listed on the roster: Chris Carson, Rashaad Penny with 2 A's, Travis Homer, and DJ Dallas. So what do you think about, we're not even going to talk about Chris Carson first. What do you think about Rashaad Penny? Are you on the standpoint of being a Rashaad Penny truther, or are you like myself who thinks that Rashaad Penny is he's just nothing for Seattle?
I wouldn't say I'm a truther. I was really interested in him before like the knee flared up again. And now like the knee flared up again. It's like, what is this guy ever going to make it back on the field? We don't know. Like I wasn't the biggest Penny fan coming out of college either because he just like basically raffle stomped the college scene because his offensive line was better than everyone else. And he came to the NFL, showed some flashes, but like, at the end of the day, everyone shows flashes, right? So you kind of have to win out. The reason why I was intrigued by him is because Chris Carson can't stay healthy either. And, the running back position is a volume game. So if he steps in opportunity, I think he's like okay enough to like produce, but I don't think he's like a world beater. But now that he's injured, it's like a lot less interesting. Like early on in the season, I was grabbing a ton of Rashaad Penny because I'm like, hey, like, he might get mixed in with Chris Carson there. And then if Chris Carson gets hurt, like he's in for pretty stellar volume as well. I mean, in the limited opportunities he did see, he did produce, but like I said, very small sample. So it's nothing to really hang your hat on.
Yeah, in 3 years, he's only played in 27 games. He did have a 5.1 yard per carry, which is a pretty solid mark for a running back. 161 rushes, 823 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns. Also somewhat good at pass catching. But like you said, if this guy just cannot get on the field, what's the point in even drafting him? I mean, he's underdog ADP running back 59. I've done so many drafts. I don't even think I've seen Rashaad Penny go in most drafts.
I think he's fine to just toss in there on that last flyer. Because I mean, to be honest, like if you're drafting underdogs, right, like rounds 16 to 18 are not difference makers. Like, I mean, usually I just try and spread it out through a couple of guys, and if they hit, great. Like if Rashaad Penny hits, he's gonna do wonders for you, right? Because if Chris Carson gets injured and he somehow makes it on the field, you're looking at probably like a mid-round RB2 for free. So that's the draw for Rashaad Penny. And in best ball, it's a lot more interesting because like you don't have to worry about making lineup decisions. Like he could just go off and have a couple big receptions or a couple touchdowns, and he could be in your lineup. Whereas in seasonal, it's like a lot less interesting because like if they're both playing, you're not going to be able to start Rashaad Penny, right? So he's basically just a backup, but a backup that has some upside. So.
Okay, if Penny was to not play like we've seen throughout his career, would you think Travis Homer or DJ Dallas would be the guy to own if there was like a waiver wire scenario? Because I don't think many people are drafting like Travis Homer. So
yeah, I mean, I think DJ Dallas is probably a little bit of a better bet. I mean, neither of them really did like much of anything, like kind of when given the opportunity. I mean, so you're not too excited about it, but if I were to bet, I'd probably just grab a DJ Dallas. Shout out to my guy Garrett Price over at Dynasty Nerds. He's a big fan of DJ Dallas.
Yeah, I love me some DJ Dallas. So now into the actual running back here. Even though there are thoughts of injury prone with Chris Carson, he is one of my favorite running backs to be drafting right now. Running back 18 on underdog, overall pick 39.2. He's going to be a guy that I have on a lot of my redraft teams this season because I think he genuinely has top 10 upside when he's healthy. Now, again, there's a huge win because he does miss games every single year. But if he's able to put up 13, 14 games, I think he's going to smash where he's being drafted right now, running back 18. What do you think about Carson?
So Chris Carson is an interesting case. He's someone that I love to root for and watch, but he's someone that I just don't have on any of my teams because, he could definitely pay off. I mean, you're drafting running back 18, but usually in that range, I'm drafting a lot of wide receivers. So like when I'm looking at like Chris Carson, he's running back 18, so he's going like what in the back half of the third, like fourth round.
Yeah, right? 39.2 right now.
Yeah, so I'm like hitting the smash button on like Mike Evans and like wide receivers in that range. So that's why I rarely have any Chris Carson. And we're talking about running back that's 26 years old. I mean, but I don't know how old his legs are and his knees are. So I would be surprised to kind of see him make it through a full season. But don't get me wrong, I'm rooting for him to do it, right? Like I want him to do it really, really badly. I just, it's not something that I'm willing to pull the trigger on in that range. So, and then, Seattle, like I said, they want to run, but like how much can they run? And Chris Carson, even though they try to force feed him some targets, dude's got bricks for hands, man. He's just not going to be a factor in the passing game. And if they brought in Dwayne Eskridge, they brought in Gerald Everett, I think there's a lot more better options. Like my view is when there's no talent, when the wide receiver room is devoid of talent, right? That's when you can kind of go and put your chips in on the running back, because that's like that's the feed out, right? But the converse is true. If they bring in more talented pass catchers, then it's going to take away from the running back, because like passing to the running back is not a plus EV move most of the time, unless you're like fucking Alvin Kamara or Christian McCaffrey. So they brought in Dwayne Eskridge, they brought in Gerald Everett. You got another year of DK Metcalf, like in his going in his third year now, and you got Tyler Lockett, who's like the most efficient duo between him and Russell Wilson in the NFL, and it has been for like multiple years running. It's not even debatable; it's just fact. So I think I'm just I'm not as excited about 2-down grinders in that range, especially older. But I see the appeal. It's just that I'd see way more appeal on wide receivers there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm someone who does like to load up early on running back. So in this round range, like you're saying, there's guys like Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, maybe DJ Moore, a little too early for him, but guys in that range that I really like to target at wide receiver. Last year, Carson was running back 14 in PPR, as well as in half PPR and 13 in standard, talking about points per game. So I feel like when he's healthy, he's a guy that could potentially win you multiple weeks, especially if Pete Carroll really does try to run the ball for some fucking reason. He always tries to run, even though Russell Wilson looks really good. That's my biggest scare away from the guys I'm going to talk about a little bit later, is that maybe they try to run the ball more, but you never know, because last year Russell Wilson looked so good, but Pete Carroll still insisted on trying to really hammer on and run the ball.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, let Russ cook. When it lasted, it was beautiful. I mean, it was beautiful. I think part of it was not letting him cook, but also part of it was just defenses adjusting. They started changing how they played DK Metcalf, how they played Tyler Lockett. And Tyler Lockett got hurt and he came back, and then was not the same self. But yeah, it's an really interesting offense. I mean, at the end of the day, I believe that game script dictates your ability to run more than anything. So like if you don't have a good defense and you can't stop them, like you're not going to be able to run, and they're in a pretty tough division. So we'll see what happens. But I'm interested kind of seeing how that passing game develops.
All right, so speaking of the passing game, time to talk about the wide receivers, Metcalf, Lockett, Dwayne Eskridge. I normally would say we would talk about Metcalf first, but I think Lockett is the most interesting wide receiver on this team when it comes to where he's going in fantasy. Underdog ADP, wide receiver number 20, overall pick 41.9. Last year in 16 games, he finished as the wide receiver 8 in PPR, 9.5 PPR. From points per game perspective, he was wide receiver 12 in PPR and 12.5 PPR. So what do you think about Tyler Lockett? Because he's one of those guys that I will be taking in drafts, but I have little confidence week to week that I'm going to genuinely know what to do with Tyler Lockett.
Yeah, I mean, Tyler Lockett, look, people are scared of like the boom bust thing, right? And that's what it comes down to. Like, yeah, like he scored 40 points, but then in these other games, he put up a couple of duds. Like my perspective for wide receiver is this, like every year there's only one Devontae Adams and there's only one Michael Thomas, right? If you're not one of those guys, you're just gonna bust like a lot of the time. I mean, if you think back to Chris Godwin's like wide receiver 1 overall performance, even he had like a ton of busts. What I care about wide receiver though is like guys who can give me like those week winning upside, because at the end of the day, like if you think back, shout out to the great Adam Harstad on Twitter, but most games are blowouts. We remember the nail biters and the ones we lose by like a point or a carry or whatever. But go back and look at your fantasy leagues. I mean, most of your weeks you're getting blown out by 20, 30 points, right? So you want these guys that are actually making a difference. And I think Tyler Lockett in the 4th round just like makes a lot of sense. I get it. He's boom bust. So don't try and get too cute with the lineups, right? I mean, if you're drafting a wide receiver in the 4th round, chances are they're probably just going to sit in your starting lineup. You're going to take the hits, you're going to take the blows as they come with you. But the key to that is understanding how the rest of your roster is constructed, right? So you're going to get boom, you're going to get bust from your wide receiver 2, which is Tyler Lockett, right? But hopefully, if you went running back early, unless you're a crazy, 0 RB zealot that likes to fade running back early, hopefully you have like a workhorse running back if you're picking early, right? You have like a CMC, a Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara. If they don't get injured, that's like really your floor, right? Your week-to-week floor comes from like your running backs and your quarterbacks, because those tend to be more predictable. But wide receiver, you kind of just got to take the variance, and you got to hope the variance hits your way when it matters most in the playoffs. But that's just part of the game. I've never really stressed too much about like these boom bust wide receivers. Like 10 12 points a week is not really going to win you the week, right? I mean, you need like 25 30 point performances, and I want as many of those guys that are are capable of doing that as possible on my team, so that when one flops, the other one kind of makes up for it.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on if you were to draft 2 running backs early and then a tight end in that range? What would you do? Do you feel comfortable if Lockett was your wide receiver 1, or would you want to go like a little more safe? Because that would be my opinion, was to try to go a little bit safer than at wide receiver.
This is definitely where like roster construction kind of comes into play, right? So Tyler Lockett is your wide receiver 1. I mean, the thing is, like, if you did go tight end and running back, though, that probably means you got like a Darren Waller, right? And like 2 running backs, you could probably afford it. Like, I have championship teams where, I drafted the startup year and I had like Dalvin Cook, Nick Chubb, like Alvin Kamara, or like Saquon Barkley and Alvin Kamara, something like that, right? I had like 3-star running backs, and I had like a good tight end, and then Tyler Lockett was my wide receiver 1. It worked, and it was fine because like I got those points elsewhere. But it really depends on who your running backs are too, right? Like, is your running back also like a very boom bust type guy that's like a 2-down grinder? Is it like a Nick Chubb? Is it like a Derrick Henry's a fucking beast, obviously, but he's still pretty boom bust, right? Or do you have like a Christian McCaffrey? Like, if I have Christian McCaffrey, I'm not too concerned about like what wide receivers I'm taking. So I'm just going for the boom guys.
Okay, I think you may have actually completely changed my mind on Tyler Lockett during this video, because I was someone who was not very in on Tyler Lockett.
I mean, yeah, dude, I think he's a good value, man. I think he's a good value.
Yeah, now, you know what? So do I now. So I completely agree with you. So next up, we're going to be talking about Mr. Decaf Metcalf, underdog ADP, wide receiver number 6, overall pick number 20.8. So he was a guy that in initial mock drafts I was seeing from a bunch of months ago, he was like a first-round draft pick. Now he's pretty solid in the middle of the second round. Last season, he finished as wide receiver 7 in PPR, 7.5 PPR, 5 in standard. Points per game perspective, wide receiver 10 in PPR, 8.5 PPR, 8 in standard. What are your thoughts on Metcalf, and do you think that he is going to have a similar season to what he did last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a fucking beast. Like, he has like massive upside because he's used in the red zone. Russell loves peppering with targets, deep ones as well. And this is his 3rd year. Like, players usually continue to get better, right? And he hasn't even hit his prime yet. So I'm big in on DK Metcalf. I love, like, for like maybe a period of a month when I was spamming underdogs drafts, I was getting like the top of the 3rd. So I'd go like workhorse running back Darren Waller, and I open like DK Metcalf, and I'd be like that's like the GOAT start for me, because then I'm getting Tyler Lockett after that and getting Russell Wilson the 6th. So I love DK Metcalf. I think he's probably fairly priced. Like, he might not finish as the wide receiver 1 overall, but he definitely has that type of upside if things go his way in the red zone. And given the volume that he's getting and the connection he has with Russ. So yeah, I'm big up on DK, both in dynasty and redraft. Love him everywhere.
Okay, so maybe you're definitely higher than Metcalf on me. I have him around like the 8-9 range. I think the top end at the wide receiver is so different for every single person. Some people I've seen have Michael Thomas as like a top 5 wide receiver again. All these guys, Calvin Ridley, Justin Jefferson, I think are going to be able to outscore DK Metcalf potentially, even AJ Brown. So in the range of where they're going right now, who would you take, AJ Brown or Metcalf? Because those are they're right next to each other in drafts.
Oh yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I've been mixing it up, but in underdogs, I've been going DK just because a stack is better and it's easier to get. But in dynasty, I literally have them back to back. I have DK ahead, but I have them all in the same tier, like DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, Justin Jefferson, like Tyreek Hill. That's like my tier 1 wide receiver for dynasty. I think for redraft, it's a little bit more complicated because you got. I think Michael Thomas is also in for a big season. I don't know if he'll be wide receiver 1 overall, but top 5 definitely within his range of outcomes. And you got like dark horses like Mike Evans is always a fucking sneaky bet to kind of seek in the top 5 just because of how many fucking touchdowns he gets. He's basically the goal line back for Tampa Bay. But yeah, I mean, the wide receiver is so fluid, right? Like, there's this, in that top range, everyone has like a couple of tiers or whatever, but you talk about the top guys like Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, and all these guys. Like, I think DK Metcalf can give them a run for their money for most of them, with the exception of maybe Devontae Adams if Aaron Rodgers plays. I think everyone else is kind of like a crapshoot. So I think I prefer DK Metcalf slightly to AJ Brown, but it's like not by any big gap or anything like that.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I think that a guy like Terry McLaurin could even outscore DK Metcalf. But again, it's very confusing. The top 10 for everyone is so different because any of these guys could easily become the wide receiver number 1. Maybe, what are the list of the guys that you think that could be the wide receiver 1? Is it a shorter list, like just Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, or is it like a deeper 6, 7, 8 guy list?
I think if Aaron Rodgers plays, Devontae Adams is always there, obviously.
Yeah.
Even if Aaron Rodgers doesn't play, Adams is probably like, top 8 still. So it's not a huge fall off. But I think the top candidates are Tyreek Hill, and I think Stephon Diggs is probably my favorite to be that, because if you're looking at the volume that they got, right, and the Bills aren't really going to change up their pass to run ratio. I mean, Devin Singletary stinks. Zach Moss stinks slightly less. But I mean, Josh Allen's going to do Josh Allen things, and they kind of open up that offense for them. I guess it depends on how defenses adjust, but I could very easily see Stephon Diggs, if he stays healthy, obviously, lead the league in targets. And the only thing he was missing last year was touchdowns. And we know touchdowns, it's pretty fluky, and we've seen Diggs be ultra efficient before in the red zone. He's a contested catch monster. So I'm not worried about Stephon Diggs in the red zone. So if he gets a couple of those touchdowns bounce his way, I think he's definitely in there. And then Tyreek Hill. I think that's the short list for wide receiver 1 overall. If DK Metcalf got there, I'd be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised, but that's not my favorite. I think it's the Diggs, Hill, and Adams trio, assuming Rodgers plays.
Yeah, you were talking about with the touchdowns, the only wide receiver who's normally with a bunch of touchdowns is Mike Evans. He's probably the only one you can really
Adams,
that you can just go ahead and put a check mark in that they're going to score 8-10 touchdowns every single year.
Yeah. I mean, to get the wide receiver 1 overall, unless you're Michael Thomas, you get 2 million targets, right?
Yeah.
You need double-digit touchdown upside, so you need to be able to hit 12 to 14, and those are the guys that really can hit that and still get monster target volume.
Yeah, so like you were talking about earlier, you really don't see any type of improvement in the Seattle defense at all. You think they're just going to be shit like last season, or do you think that they'll show more of what they showed at the end of last season? Because I feel like they were at least a bit better. They weren't.
Yeah,
terrible.
They definitely got a little bit better, but they're not the elite defense that we used to see, right? Pete Carroll, thinking back to the days of establishing the run when they had Legion of Boom. I mean, they don't have fucking Legion of Boom no more.
Yeah,
Jamal Adams, sure, he's good, and Bobby Wagner, was one of the most underrated linebackers, although I think he's probably getting a little bit older now. But they're just not the same. They're not the same, and Russ doing Russ things, and they have DK, they have Lockett, they have one of the best wide receiver duos in the league. So I mean, to me, it just makes sense to use it. But I get it. Coaches don't always do the thing that makes sense, so people are concerned.
Yeah, I agree. Pete Carroll does not seem like the kind of guy who does what makes sense at all. You brought up his gum chewing. It's so fucking annoying when they pan to him on the sideline. He's munching on his gum, and then they just call some absolutely ridiculous play. That's just what he. Yeah. That's literally every NBC broadcast of the game.
That's what he does, man.
He's the king of that. So the other wide receiver to talk about is Dwayne Eskridge. Do you have any thoughts of him being potentially valuable in fantasy this season at all, or is he just a dynasty guy?
He's more of a dynasty guy. I remember very early on in the offseason, people were talking about him as a first round pick, and I was like, okay, this is a bit too wild for me. And he got all that Senior Bowl hype. I personally don't give a shit about the Senior Bowl, but he got all that Senior Bowl hype, Senior Bowl coverage. But now his price has fallen to a point where it's hey, I'm willing to fire some shots, because his profile isn't horrible. Yes, he's really old, but from a production perspective, he's been pretty good. He's definitely a smaller guy, but so's Tyler Lockett, and kind of made that work. I don't think in seasonal you're gonna draft this guy, right? I don't. That's not gonna happen. Don't use a draft pick. In best ball, I've been drafting him because it's a cheap way to complete a stack with Russell Wilson again. So, and there could definitely be a couple boom games. I mean, Russell Wilson made David Moore. David Moore had a couple boom games. Do you guys know who David Moore is? Most people don't know who he is or give a shit about him. But he was another guy similar to Eskridge, is not a sterling profile, but had a decent enough analytical profile, and made some plays, and he'll have a couple of those weeks where he gets 100 yards and a touchdown, because that's what happens when you're playing with Russell Wilson. So in best ball, I'm interested in, and he's going I'm mostly drafting 17th, 18th round. So again, those are just free picks to me. So if I have Russell Wilson, I'll just snag him and complete a triple or a quad stack. If not, then I'll probably just stay away. But in seasonal, you're probably not going to be drafting this guy, or even you're probably not even going to be wavering him. At least I'm not, unless I'm desperate.
Okay, so speaking of David Moore, that's one of those guys that always pissed me off, because I always thought he was Tyler Lockett. They're kind of a similar build, and you see him toe tap in the end zone. You're that's Tyler Lockett. No, somehow that's David Moore.
Yeah,
so that was
David
pretty
Moore
annoying.
Touchdowns, man. Those are good times.
You know what team he's on now?
He's on Carolina, right? So now it's gonna be confusing. So you're gonna get people watching. When you guys get trades in Dynasty, watch out if you get a D Moore. Make sure you open up that D Moore, and it's DJ Moore, not David Moore. I know some guys are sneaky and will probably try and get one over on you.
Yeah, no, Twitter, I've seen so many of those on Twitter.
Yeah.
It's so funny. So the final position to be talking about here on the team is obviously the tight end. Now, they haven't had a tight end for a while in Seattle that was pretty good, but they did get Gerald Everett, who I think is pretty solid. Nothing super special, but he is coming off as tight end number 15. Do you have any interest in drafting a guy like Everett, or do you think he has limited upside?
I have a ton of interest in drafting. I've been drafting Everett all off season. I've been drafting Everett since February, March, April when he was like tight end 22. I think his price has gone at least caught up to him now, right? He's going to like the 12th, 13th round. I remember when he was going in the 15th, 16th. Every time I got there, I'm like, all right, I'm taking Gerald Everett every time. And then again, just like another very easy way to afford a stack with Russell Wilson, because Seattle, when they get to the red zone, it's Russell Wilson touchdown time. Like, I mean, people, we talk about regressing the mean and whatever, and Russell Wilson definitely, regresses a bit, but Russell Wilson's like mean is 6% like touchdown, right?
Yeah.
So when we get there, like you're looking for guys that can catch passes in the red zone, and that's Tyler Lockett, that's DK Metcalf, and that's Gerald Everett. So I think Gerald Everett has like that 8 touchdown, maybe on the outside chance, maybe even like a 8 to 10 touchdown range. Because if you look at what Jimmy Graham did, I mean, Gerald Everett now I think is a more athletic than what Jimmy Graham was when he made it to Seattle. And I don't think Gerald Everett is like a stud world beater, but I think he's better than probably what he got credit for when he was playing with the Rams. So I'm very interested in Gerald Everett. I remember when people were drafting freaking Anthony Firkser over Gerald Everett. I'm like, what is going on here? I'm just going to not draft any Anthony Firkser and draft Gerald Everett like 3 rounds later. Thank you very much. So hopefully people got some exposure early. His price is caught up, but I think it's still reasonable in the double digits.
Yeah, his price has continued to rise recently. It's up 21.42 picks in the last week.
Yeah.
So that just shows how much he's rising. He's a guy that I also like. Would you think that he has any outside shot of finishing as a top 5 guy, or is he just like a tight end you draft if you completely punted the position?
Yeah, he's more of like a guy you draft and you punt the position. Could he finish top 5? Like, yeah, I mean, like Jimmy Graham did. Like I said, all you need is that 10 touchdowns. If he gets 10 touchdowns, then he's top 5. Like, look at Robert Tonyan. He had 500 something yards and 11 touchdowns, and he was a top 5 tight end. So, I think it's if I'm gonna bet on an outside tight end to get there, it's someone that's gonna be very athletic and has shown some level of efficiency in the past and has capabilities in the red zone on a good offense with a good quarterback. And he kind of checks a lot of those boxes. So I'm personally interested in him. And if he got there, I think, we'd know how he got there. It's through touchdowns.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So before we close out of this video, I guess there isn't too much more to talk about the Seattle Seahawks. But real quick question. Would you prefer to draft Gerald Everett or Mike Gesicki?
I like Gerald Everett.
Okay.
I've never been a big Gesicki guy, even though he has improved quite a bit. So, but it's pretty close. I think, are they going really back to back right now?
I don't think they're necessarily back to back, but they're in a similar range, like Everett, Irv Smith, in that kind of range back there.
Yeah. So I mean, for there, it just comes down to like if you think about like each offense, right? And I think Miami's in for a much bigger year, but Tua's not Russell Wilson, obviously.
Yeah.
And then they have Will Fuller, the God, and they have Jalen Waddle out there, Devontae Parker, and Gesicki's just never been like a very efficient player. Like he gets by on touchdowns as well. Don't get me wrong, but if I'm going to bet on touchdowns from the offense, I'm probably going to bet on Gerald Everett over Mike Gesicki. I think Gerald Everett's also a better player. So.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. I like Everett as well. So do you have anything else to say before we hop out of here? This one was pretty quick. I mean, 30 minutes, that's not fucking quick in reality, but not some super long, drawn-out video. So do you have anything else you want to add on here?
Not much, man. Just congrats on all the channel success. And, everybody like 14K subscribers now and like million something views. So, people don't know, but like, man, the grind is tough. Like I do like a couple of videos a week and I'm like, fuck, like this is taken out of me. So you're doing it every day. So, hopefully viewers kind of appreciate what you're doing behind the scenes there. But, I know from my personal experience as a much less voluminous content creator that can't be easy. So, man, shout out to you. Congrats to you and the channel and all the folks that kind of help you there.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Make sure you guys check out everything that Mike said earlier. Make sure you check out his Patreon as well if you are a Dynasty degenerate like him, obviously, like he said earlier. So make sure you guys check all that out. Check out Mike on Twitter as well. His Twitter's on the screen. It's also linked down below. Thank you again for coming on. Like I say in all of these videos, I am only going to bring on someone if I actually respect them and think they actually have something important to say. A lot of people, they'll just bring on other analysts because they think, oh, that'll bring in the views, right? No, that's not why I brought on Mike. Obviously, he'll bring in some views as well, but that's not the only reason. It's because you listen through his whole video. He was talking a lot of the time, not me, and you guys actually hear his opinion as well, which I think is pretty solid. So thank you again for coming on.
Thanks for having me, man. It was a good time.
Awesome. So thank you guys for watching again. Make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. Make sure you have a great rest of your guys' day. Check out Mike again, as always.